From Good Will Hunting, Miss Misery, music and lyrics by Elliott Smith.
Somehow, Johnny Walker.
An Academy Award-nominated singer-songwriter. His acclaimed new CD, I have it right here, is called Figure Eight. Here's Elliott Smith.
Eight is the brand new album from my next guest, and on May 17th, he'll start a 3-night run at Irving Plaza right here in New York City. Please welcome back to the show, Elliott Smith.
The thing is, his songs are not funny. You know, they're pretty sincere.
There was an Elliott Smith song. Yeah, he was wonderful. Called Needle in the Hay. That had a quality to it that was somewhat creepy, but very, very honest, and also threatening.
Johnny's back. Johnny's back in town.
Yeah, he is. He never left.
He's everywhere.
You got to have Johnny Depp. Can't seem to leave him. I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of an intro because, of course, a lot of people, they're automatically saying, who's Elliott Smith? So it's nice to establish that who is Elliott Smith. He's an Academy Award or award-nominated artist, acclaimed by many, many musicians. He's kind of like how you have a comedian's comedian. He was sort of a musician's musician in a lot of ways. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people knew him when he was alive. I mean, in death, it kind of dissipated. Obviously, his career was truncated by his death, you know, at a 34. I mean, it's a pretty young age.
Yeah, which is really sad. And I kind of feel like because his death occurred not long after 9/11 and everything was in such a turmoil, it was like 9/11 sort of erased everything prior to it. And a lot of things got overshadowed by that. And we also invaded Iraq. And
right.
I think
that happens. That happens, you know, historically. I mean, Aldous Huxley, who lived across the street from me years ago, died on November 22nd, 1963, and got no coverage because of some other events that occurred that day.
Something happened?
Something happened and nobody knew Huxley died, and it was in the paper. I mean, it was covered, but I'm saying sometimes news events will, you know, completely smash other news events.
That's crazy. Now, he's also kind of important to us and our channel because we have history and it's tied to this son of a bitch right here.
Oh, Gil Reyes, the director. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. He kind of killed him and his partner, right?
Yep, him and his partner.
I'm trying to remember what happened here, Eric. You remember it better than I do.
Well, and that's it. I'm going to tell the story because then people will say, "Oh, that's why you didn't cover this, story since last October, September." When we started this spin-off channel, America's Untold Stories, off of my channel, we first did stories on the Eric Hunley channel. Elliott Smith was one of our very first live streams, super early.
Interesting.
And essentially what happened was we were covering Elliott Smith and there were people involved with it. And since I do body language, body language experts and statement analysis, I was like, hey, we've got some testimony. Let's get that analyzed. Well, that testimony came from a documentary that this guy did.
Right.
And even though I used it with the fair use requirements and all that, I made the mistake of putting the little piece in different places. And then he struck it. And I was like, whoa, okay, fine. Hey, do you want me to take it down? And in response, he struck the other two, and the entire channel got struck off of YouTube.
Right.
We got tired of waiting because the channel was brand new. We weren't even 3 weeks old, Mark. Mm-hmm. And we are not completely off YouTube because this son of a bitch. Anyway, So we created a second channel, America's Untold Story, and we relaunched again in October.
Right.
I put all the footage together into one extended cut and then re-uploaded it. And the son of a bitch struck that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was only one. And
Right.
so all of my copyright counterclaims succeeded. So
Oh,
four
wow.
of them,
Bravo.
100%. And Laidback News is actually the first America's Untold Stories that was obliterated and had to be pulled from backup upon winning the copyright counterclaim. So, folks, this is why we didn't do part 2, which we were planning to do. And then life got in the way, just other subjects. Alec Baldwin had to go and shoot a cinematographer.
Oh.
And it just sort of took us a little hijack down the line. So that's a little, trip down memory lane. People who have been with us.
A lot. I blocked that out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, he's sitting there with the former Nancy of the Sid and Nancy relationship that they had, and that's Jennifer Chiba, who was part of a band called Happy Endings, an old girl band that played here in Hollywood. Also, C.S. Lewis died. Right, I didn't know that. I have to send my condolences to his family. Yeah,
and that's 2 major writers. Jeez,
right on the same day. Wow, thank you, Pasha. Anyway, so she was in a band called Happy Endings. He was producing it, and here in Hollywood. And there's different overlapping. I have a connection to it because the LA Weekly was covering it at the time. I was at the LA Weekly. I knew the people involved. Just to give you some background on how I got there. Friends of mine were in this Jennifer Chiba, yeah. She was in a band called the Warlocks, which was a jam band here in Hollywood that sometimes had 15 people in it, oddly enough. And people would just be in that band and disappear, and it had a lot of transition, but had a lot of people in it. And that was the original name of the Grateful Dead, was the Warlocks, which is how they took the name. Just for some background. But I had friends in that band. In fact, my band opened for that band at a place called The Garage that's now called The Virgil, here on Virgil. Somebody told me the other day. I didn't know that. Anyway, make a long story short, there's overlapping people. I was here. In fact, I drove by the house the other day where the death occurred on Lemoyne. I live on the borderline of Silver Lake in Los Feliz. And, it'll be 20 years next year. It's like 19 years coming up in October. This October is 19 years. Next year will be the 20th anniversary of his demise. And his music is licensed all the time. The Royal Tannenbaums, that movie has it. A lot of movies have his music in it. Obviously, Good Will Hunting. A lot of TV shows use it today. CSI a lot of times uses Elliott Smith's music. You may not realize it's his, but the licensing of it, he has a lot of fans who are in show business who are of that generation, 40-ish now.
And it's a moody type of.
It's very dark and moody, and I highly recommend it. I mean, I've been a fan for years. I know I have all his albums, obviously, and a lot of people that I know obviously have all these albums of his. The closest I could say it's kind of like Paul Simon, meets like Nick Drake or something, and he's an incredible lyricist, but it's he's very Beatle-esque. In fact, he went to London to record at Apple on the Beatles piano. Some of his music is very Beatle-esque. Long, the cover of the Beatles, George Harrison, was the last song he ever performed in public here in Hollywood, his last performance. So there's a lot of overlaps with the Beatles sound. He'd been in bands, and then he finally went solo. He was in a band called Stranger Than Fiction with a guy named Tony Lash. He was in a band called Heat Miser that signed with Virgin Records. So he had success before he became a solo artist. But they were loud, aggressive punk bands coming out of Portland, which is where he made his musical bones. He'd grown up in Dallas. This is, I think, for a video. Heat Miser video. I have that same microphone. That's a bullet mic.
Vintage.
Yeah, I have the same one. A lot of people have it, though. It's a good harmonica mic. But anyway, so he was in this band Heat Miser. They had an X amount of success. he becomes a solo artist, and it really takes off. And it takes off really by other musicians showcasing him, literally dragging him to the labels. And he signs a major record deal, and then ends up in, because of Portland with Gus Van Sant, he ends up in Good Will Hunting, which gets nominated for the Academy Award, and then his music gets nominated. That's why you saw Madonna nominating him. Then he ends up on Saturday Night Live.
Letterman, Conan, all the late nights. Yeah,
he just becomes extremely large, but in a weird time period and a short time period, which is why a lot of people don't know him. I highly recommend his music to anyone who's out there. And I don't know, maybe we could put some of it on Locals or whatever. I don't know how you can do that audio wise, but maybe some of the videos, or right? Can we do anything or no?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I probably can do it behind the Locals because it's not putting it out there. So
right.
Yeah, I'll see what I can come up with. But yeah,
so anyway, he kind of gets addicted to drugs, which is pretty common. And he has a series of girlfriends, series of drugs. And when we left off, I think we got up to this part right here, and we left off in part 1, which I strongly recommend people go back and look, because a lot of the things are not going to be in this episode, right, Eric? Because we kind of left off at the incident, quote unquote, that occurred on Lemoyne Street in Hollywood in that particular October.
Yes, and in the first one we cover, the history. I mean, we go over a lot of his depression. He had suicide attempts. He is a cutter. I mean, the guy,
right? He
had major issues. He was a very hardcore junkie. He went into one of those where they drop you in a coma to get you out. And also, I had both Lena Sisko and Gavin.
Oh,
Stone
right. I forgot about
body
that.
language analysis.
I forgot.
So that's all. There's a link in the description. So I do.
Okay.
I hope you guys do check that out.
He doesn't want to go. He does hook up with Malibu rehab with a guy named Jerry Schoenkoff, which is kind of a discredited rehab out there. It's kind of a Motel 6 turned into a rehab. Jerry is kind of a hustler, but he knows addiction inside now, former heroin addict. And most of these guys are hustlers anyway who run these places. But so that's neither here nor there. But he goes into that place, and he goes to there's Jerry right there. I wonder if he's still around. Anyway, I strongly recommend Allison Camus' book called A Question Mark, an investigation into the mysterious death of Elliott Smith. Her book is really the book to read. There's a couple of other books. Oh yeah, A Question Mark. That book I really recommend. She gets into all the background rumors and innuendo, and a lot of people are afraid to talk on the record, so she gives them pseudonyms, but gets out a ton of information on this subject in one book. Now keep in mind, there's no statute of limitations on what we're about to discuss, so this is still, to this day, right now, an open case with the Los Angeles Police Department right now. And if you want to go back to what happened on that day, I think we could start there, Eric, right?
Sure.
Okay. He had gotten clean, Elliott Smith, and was trying, according to sources, now this is very Rashomon-like, trying to break up with Jennifer Chiba. Both of them were in a sick, deadly dance of drugs and alcohol. She had blocked out all of his friends. According to every friend I know who knew him, she had blocked them out. When he came out of rehab, he moved in with her on Lemoyne Street. And she, even when they were on tour, she controlled backstage. She kept out ex-girlfriends. She kept out female friends, male friends. She was the gatekeeper. And she became a brutally harsh gatekeeper who was seen to have knockdown, drag-out fights with him. One studio musician said that he told him that Jennifer had chased him around with a knife the year before. They had according to neighbors, loud, vicious fights in this two-story apartment, two-story building on Lemoyne. They were on the top floor. And whatever happened that day is the subject of what we're going to talk about right now, because it's very confusing since there is only one witness, and that's his girlfriend, Jennifer Chiba. So we either believe everything she says or we go in the other direction. Now, she claims that she needed a ride to therapy by him. She had to go to therapy. Keep in mind, she's a therapist. Keep in mind, she is a marriage counselor. Keep in mind, she's a certified art therapist, or what that.
She works with kids, especially.
Well, that was later, yeah, but later on. But at first, she was a counselor, a therapist. But she needs therapy. Why does she need therapy? Because she's been institutionalized multiple times in psychiatric units herself. And she was arrested for drunk driving, got a DUI, couldn't drive, had her license revoked. And now Elliott had to be the wheelman for her on all her errands. So according to her, he was supposed to drive her to therapy. And they got into an argument, a yelling match, and she went into the bathroom and locked the door and took a shower. And she was in there for about 5 minutes, according to her. Now, she has altered her story on numerous occasions, so we're going to get into that. She's altered her story, which Allison points out. She lists all the different articles and interviews she's given. And she says she's in there 5 to 10 minutes taking a shower, hears an incredible thud, opens the door to the shower, and in the kitchen off to the left, she sees Elliott standing with her back to her over the sink. And when she hears this scream, he turns around and he's got a giant kitchen knife sticking out of his heart.
Mm-hmm. Up and down.
Well, we'll get to that a little bit. Yeah, we'll get into the coroner's report, because that's of major interest to this case, is the coroner's report, which we have and we'll put up on Locals, I presume, Eric. The long form. I have the 27-page version.
I do too.
Okay, good. We'll put that on Locals for members. Mm-hmm. So what she does is, this is all from her point of view now. This is all according to her. She pulls out the knife, which you're not supposed to do, which you're trained in CPR.
Well, no. You missed some steps, Mark, because she sees him with a knife,
right, and
he has it out, and then remember, he stabs himself again, and then she chases him.
Right, no. Hold on for a second. Hold on. By the time she pulls out the knife, he's already stabbed himself twice, which will be revealed in the coroner's report, according to her.
Right.
I never saw that he pulled it out and stabbed himself in front of her. What I saw and I read and what Allison says is that the knife is implanted in his heart. He's running around now. Keep in mind, the running part was revealed to me. I didn't know about this. He's running around. There's blood everywhere, and he's heading towards the back of the apartment. Mm-hmm. And it's a long balcony. Apartment. The balcony is in the back bedroom, and he's running on blood, and blood is shooting out everywhere. He's covered with blood, and she somehow tackles him and pulls out the knife and begins to give him CPR. Now, because she's giving him CPR, and I just got recertified recently for CPR, she begins, I just want to say, she pulls out the knife, starts giving him CPR, but the blood starts shooting out of the wound. Because
like a Tarantino movie, I'm sure.
Right. The blood starts shooting out of the wound because the CPR is pushing the blood out of the wound. Not really a good thing to do. And somehow she waits or doesn't call for X amount of time, possibly 20 minutes, according to some sources. She said the phone was broken, the landline was broken, and her cell phone wasn't charged. Some combination of phone problems that has varied. She calls for an ambulance. They show up. They take him away. She doesn't go with the ambulance. And as the police show up, she finds the Post-it, Eric. I don't know if we have a picture of the Post-it or not. I don't know.
There is no Post-it picture that exists.
Right.
Because I would have done the handwriting analysis on it. But
right. Now, the reason I mentioned the Post-it and some of this other evidence, including the knife, including his diary, which I'm just going to explain in 2 seconds, is the family had to get under a Freedom of Information Act request from LAPD to give up the evidence, and they still refused to give it up after a FOIA request successful by the family. They would not give up any of this because LAPD said it's an open case. So that's why they didn't give up the stuff, including the handwritten note. So please forgive me, God, I love you, Elliott, right?
Right, and there's questions whether his name was misspelled on it.
Right, but that was the LAPD misspelling it, not the note itself.
Well, we don't know. We haven't seen it. That's the problem.
Right, but the coroner saw it, and she said that it was misspelled in the police report in an interview. So we do have an official statement about the misspelling from people who have seen the note, speaking out about that misspelling. That's been dispelled, so to speak, the misspelling.
The dispelled misspell?
Yeah. Anyway, so the blood is everywhere. They take him away. The police show up. She tells him he committed suicide. He's been suicidal for years. He's a heroin addict. She spills her guts about the guy, and all of a sudden picks up this note, and she goes, "Oh, look, a suicide note," right? So she gives it to the cops, and the cops take it as a suicide note. Here's the problem, and I think this is really the big problem with the case. The police ruled it a suicide prematurely because of what they saw, what she said, and their own ineptitude until it gets to the coroner. And they should have waited, but they didn't. They declared it a suicide early on, and that leaked out into the media. And I think that's really the problem. The coroner's report took a while, and the coroner Sheinin came out with it's either a homicide or a suicide indecisive, and she makes the case for the homicide in the autopsy report very strongly. And we're going to get into that now. We're going to get into that. But let me just add some other colorful things to this, because this guy, Rob Perringer, who was his drummer, who had fallen out of favor with him, comes over after the police leave and is mopping up the blood with Chiba. And it's not even a crime scene. It's not protected. There's no, here he is. And it's his Sherlock Holmes method there. He starts, he believes that it was suicide, and he has defended Chiba to the hilt. Now, some people said they were lovers. He was the drummer. There may have been a scheme. We don't know between the two of them, some sort of double indemnity. Both of them were impoverished. And Elliott was worth a fortune because of the publishing of all his music, which is
he also is leaving his band to go to Scotland.
Right. Allison says that was a little ways off, but regardless of how far off that was, he was still trying to get back with this woman on the left, who's Scottish, Valerie Deeran, who was blocked out. That's her on the left. That's Valerie, who was his ex-girlfriend before he was with Chiba. Now, keep in mind, he gets out of rehab and moves in with Chiba that year. So that was a relatively new relationship. Chiba says it was multi-years, but there's nobody who could find that to be true, that they were in a multi-year relationship, because he was with Valerie. He was with Joanna Bohm, who he took to the Oscars, who was really the love of his life, was Joanna, who was in a bunch of bands herself as a bass player. There she is. Yeah. She was in Calamity Jane. She went with him to the Oscars. There she is. I know it's a good photo of her. And this, most of his love songs are about Joanna. That's a great photo of them before the darkness came. This is probably 99, 98. Yeah, it's around that time. Wow. He looks like a baby and clean compared to the later.
And having fun.
And having fun with her. They were madly in love with each other. I mean, show me a later photo of him just to show the contrast. A photo at the end, when the darkness had descended already.
Sure. This is a perfect one.
Oh, yeah. That's the two of them high as fuck. Now, what everyone has told me is that she was scoring heroin for him, and she was chipping on heroin. She was basically an alcoholic, but that she got him hooked on heroin, and she would go out and buy for him, Chiba. And yeah, he looks pretty high right there. But he had successfully cleaned up and had a year clean, Eric. He called up Larry Crane, the engineer who had engineered his albums, called up Larry Crane, and he says, I want to record an album with you. Now, this is interesting because Larry Crane says it's a week before he committed suicide. So Crane, I don't know if you have a photo of Larry there. I think he's still in Hollywood. There he is. Great guy, really sharp dude, great engineer. Larry Crane says, why would somebody call me up? I haven't heard from him in over a year. He gets clean. He says, let's continue working on the albums. and this is a week before he kills himself. So Crane doesn't buy into it, and a bunch of people like Gus Van Sant, the director, doesn't buy into it. There's Mark Flanagan on the left.
Lanigan, right?
Not Mark Lanigan. Mark Lanigan was the guy who was the musician who ended up in my garage, who recently died of an overdose.
Oh, yeah, he was in the band. One of the bands.
Which one?
Screaming Trees. That's
Screaming Trees. Right. That guy ended up kicking dope in my garage in Pasadena, but that's a subject for another episode. This is Mark Flanagan, who, hold on, just go back to Flanagan for 1 second, who owned a really exclusive nightclub in Hollywood on Fairfax called Largo. And that's John Brion. And Brion was in residence there, and Largo had a music room. It's across the street from Cantor's Deli on Fairfax. And there's a very exclusive music room, VIP only, invites most of the time at Largo. And Elliott began to play there before it really got dark, and he was playing with John Brion. So Lanigan does not believe in the suicide either. I just wanted to put him up there as the club owner doesn't buy it. Because people have said everybody, and this is Rob Schnapp, an album record producer who also has mixed feelings about the suicide. They're just not buying it, Eric. They're just not buying it. They're not public. They're not going on 60 Minutes. They're not on Good Morning America. This is not the Baldwin case. These people are all in a industry that is very insular. Let me just put it that way.
Sure. Hollywood. Well, it's not going to help them.
It doesn't
by
help
going
them,
out
yeah.
and raising a fuss, obviously.
Right. Like, it doesn't help them. They don't like LAPD anyway. And I believe that one of the reasons LAPD did not pursue the case is they had failed in numerous recent high-profile cases.
Robert Blake was
one. Michael Jackson had been recently a case. I mean, there were a couple of smaller celebrity ones, but
obviously OJ. It was within range of OJ in the 10 years.
There was a guy who was the DA at the time named Garcetti. Might be related to the current mayor, who can't seem to become the ambassador to India, who has now hired people to harass senators. But that's yet another story for another day of the current situation with the Indian ambassadorship. But his father had lost these high-profile celebrity cases, and I believe they looked at this one as one they could sweep under the rug and just let it go as a suicide, simply because it would take a lot to make it work. You know what I mean? They'd have to be super aggressive. But what I wanted to do, and I had put together a series for Netflix that we're trying to get produced on this particular case, was to have it brought before a grand jury, for God's sake. Let a grand jury decide if there's enough evidence here to indict her. Now, she has recently fled to Ireland, and I think she's sensing
Wales.
Well, no, I think she moved from Wales to Ireland now, according to Allison. I think she's moved again. But the point of the matter is she's left the country. And I think that's not a coincidence that she's fled the country.
I'm gonna give her a little fair break, though, because her husband is Welsh and from Wales. So it's possible.
This is a woman who has only gone after rock stars her entire life as a groupie. She was in a multi-year relationship with Rivers Cuomo. I don't know if you have a photo of Rivers from the band Weezer. Weezer was a pretty big band out here during the 90s. And Rivers Cuomo wrote numerous songs about her, including a space opera. A space opera, which he never produced, where she was playing, or was the character Maria in the space opera, and it was called Songs from the Black Hole. I just wanted to get that in there. There's no relevance to this. But anyway, when the incident happened, Jennifer Chiba jumped on a plane to go to Hong Kong, or possibly Tokyo. We're not sure. But she stopped in Boston, and that ticket was purchased by Rivers Cuomo, who aided and abetted possibly an escape by her after the murder or suicide, whichever the LAPD would finally decide. She fled the coop, and she was not sticking around. She hung out in Boston for a long time until she felt the oh, there's Cuomo, right? There's the Weezer dude. Now, the Weezer guy only dates Asian women. Keep that in mind. Every girl he's ever had is an Asian girlfriend.
And he was big time. I mean, in fairness,
He's still here. It's pretty big right now.
I mean, Weezer is a big band.
Right. Oh yeah. No, what I'm saying is, she hooked up with God. She was like a professional groupie, where she would say, and she told people she was going to get Elliott Smith. Now, Elliott Smith was not as sharp as the Weezer guy, so he was easily taken down by her. And this is what this certain predatory women in Hollywood who do this. Ask Joe Walsh. Ask Ringo.
Ask Johnny Depp.
Right. Ask Johnny Depp. Yeah, but she at least had a career. This woman had a fledgling band called Happy Endings, and which is another great name for a band, and wanted
especially
his help.
When you're an Asian.
Yeah, Happy Endings.
It's kind of like okay, interesting choice.
There's she wanted to be Courtney Love, and there's a lot of similarities to Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain out of this mess. A lot of similarities. She wanted that publishing.
Yeah, and by the way, Courtney Love pointed out that there were similarities, which is
Courtney Love said this is the greatest murder-suicide I've ever heard of. Whatever. And Courtney Love was on the case. Well, she chimed in at some point at the beginning when people were choosing up sides. But over the years, this Jennifer Chiba has worked this suicide angle in books and in articles and Suicide Prevention Foundation stuff and mental health things, which is her background, to where people, tended to just say, fuck, it was probably a suicide. And he wrote about suicide. But one thing Jerry Schoenkoff said recently, he said, junkies don't commit suicide by taking a butcher knife and stabbing it themselves in the heart. They OD. And he's right about that, Jerry. He's right about that. But let's get into the autopsy. Let's get into the autopsy a little bit here, Eric. Because in this autopsy, there's a couple of things I didn't realize since the time we did part one. And what Allison does in her wonderful book is she takes every aberrational part of this particular crime and shows you the percentages from studies as to how small each of these aberrations are regarding the Smith suicide, right? So she looks at the percentages of what percentage of suicides are with a knife. You know what I mean? She takes it over and down, further down the road each time. In other words, women come at men with a knife in a fight twice as often as men come at a woman with a fight with a knife, right?
Really?
That's a weird one. It's a weird one.
Yeah.
That's a weird one. Okay. The percentages of suicide with knife are like 2%, right? So there's your 2% of suicides with a knife.
And that includes wrist cutting.
That includes, which is the bulk. Okay, the bulk, as she points out, are throat and wrist cutting, right? Second to that is abdomen, and it's a small percentage with abdomen.
These might be Sabuku.
Very rare, but that's like the third choice, and that's a distant third, right?
Right.
It's throat and wrist, the bulk, and normally done in the middle of the night alone under the influence. That is a massive percentage. So she again extrapolates out to where she gets to the end of all the aberrational things, where each person says, well, it could have happened. It's 5% of guys did this with, this. And she takes it out to 0.0002% chance that he did this to himself based on all the studies combined. Fascinating work she did in the book, contacting all these forensic experts and telling them, without getting into the details, about the autopsy. That's why I recommend the book. So,
and he did it twice.
Again, this is another statistical anomaly. But one that I learned recently from looking at the coroner's report is the wounds are vertical, not horizontal. Think about that at home, folks. You'd have to twist your arm like this, Eric, because if you take your right arm with a knife, it's going to come in horizontally or at an angle of 45 degrees. So you've got that factor. Nobody drives a knife through their clothing. You take off your shirt. This is through the clothing. Everybody has hesitation wounds. He doesn't have hesitation wounds is when you, Eric, if you were stabbing yourself, you would probe around gently in the area to find the spot for you to plunge in the knife.
Because it hurts. I mean,
it hurts. That's why some enormous percentage of the people who do this with a knife are schizophrenic. The enormity of mentally ill people, the bulk of the people, are mentally ill. Mentally ill. That's who does knife stuff. So you probe around with the knife and creates hesitation wounds. He doesn't have hesitation wounds. What he's got, according to the coroner, are defensive wounds on the back of his arms, here and here. Defensive wounds, fresh wounds. Chiba said that he was a cutter. This is a highly female aberration called cutting. The amount of men who do it is very, very small. She may be confessing through projection, Eric.
Could be.
I have started to think closely to this case that she, according to other boyfriends, would have these meltdown fights where she would lock herself in the bathroom and threaten to kill herself. Because think about it.
Can't you like knives? A lot.
Right. And Chiba's like knives, as we pointed out in the
Sunny Chiba.
Right. So let's, for argument's sake, let's say she goes into the bathroom. He's leaving her. He's clean. He's sober. It's 12 noon on a Friday. Who the hell kills themselves with a knife on a Friday at 12 noon? Zero. The numbers are not even measurable, my friend. But let's take the opposite track. Let's say she says, I'm going to kill myself if you leave me, which apparently she has a history and a histrionic history of doing, right? He knocks on the door saying, come on out, please, honey, don't do this. And she's in there with the knife, without the knife, who knows? She comes out, she stabs him in the heart, let's say, and he goes down, she pulls it out. Now, according to everyone, she should have been covered with blood. And when the police arrived, think about what she said she did. CPR on the floor, slipping in the blood. Why is he running? When a person commits suicide, they don't run around.
Well, especially when you stab yourself in the heart twice with both. Because, hold on, we'll go back to the start of the coroner's report. Let's look at the description of the wounds. We have stab wound 1, to chest, potentially fatal.
Right.
Stab to the chest, fatal.
Right.
So,
yeah, both of them are fatal wounds.
So how in the hell do you fatally stab yourself twice and then go run for the balcony?
Well, what I'm starting to understand from various people is the running was escaping from the assailant.
Sure.
That's why he's running, because she's stabbing him in the chest.
That it appears that way, or somebody.
Okay. So when she shows up, when the police show up, by the way, her hair is wet. She's totally clean. She took a shower after the alleged incident, not before, Eric. I don't think she was in the shower when this thing happened. I think she took the shower afterwards. That's why her hair is wet. What's that?
Or
she
never left the bathroom until the deed was done, and it could have been somebody else.
Right. Well, we've discussed that. We have discussed that there might be a co-conspirator in this case. I don't want to name names, but there was a guy mopping up the blood. I don't know anybody who would have me come over and mop up the blood of their dead boyfriend that day. It just seems like a completely aberrational thing to be involved in.
Well, it's like almost one of those old jokes about a true friend is the one that helps you dispose of
a body, which is essentially what Rob Perringer is doing here with this mopping up. It's a mopping up operation. It's kind of like at a Pulp Fiction.
This is the name you're not naming.
He admitted it on camera. He admitted it on camera. I'm just repeating what he said. But it's kind of like Pulp Fiction when the fixer comes over to the house to get rid of the bodies. I mean, holy cow. Anyway, so he's running around. He's got a knife in his chest. It hasn't been pulled out yet. And she pulls it out, which is, of course, completely the opposite of what you're trained to do with CPR. Now, there's no prints on the knife, and the police say that's because it was a smooth handle, hard plastic handle that wouldn't. There's some hesitation wounds right there on the left and on the right.
For defensive.
Which are defensive. What? Right. If you're thinking suicide,
you don't stab your hand before your chest.
No, that's never done. 0% on that. Everything that is claimed by Chiba or the suicide pro-suicide people is a aberrational, tiny, microscopic percentage of suicides. And take it from Chiba, who has attempted suicide and has ended up in mental institution from attempts. Okay, so this is a woman who knows what she's talking about.
True. Actually, we get a super chat that's coming in too. Yeah, a kitchen knife between the third and fourth rib will do it every time. And let me mute you for a second.
Twice apparently to make sure. You know, I guess it's not enough.
I got to mute you to get rid of an echo. 1, 2, 3. Okay, hopefully that takes care of that. Yeah, I still hear myself, but okay.
Okay. Well, the reality of it is the police, I believe, bought into this thing and went about their business. And it wasn't until the coroner's report came out and started to reopen this case, which kind of was closed by the suicidal decision by the cops, which was premature. She leaves it, rightfully so, as a possible murder or homicide or suicide. And that's exactly correct. I mean, the reason you would have a grand jury is because of a situation like this. This is why you go to a grand jury. If you don't know, you can't have the case open for 40 years. At some point, you got to bite the bullet and say, look, we got to clear the books here, Eric, right?
Yep. And interestingly enough, somehow this coroner's report got out.
Yeah.
Whereas they've got all the other evidence locked down. So I can't help but wonder if this coroner might not have wanted it to get out there.
That's a public document. That's a public document in L.A. We're allowed to look at these coroner's reports.
All of them?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I've studied many of them. There are quite a few. But the evidence, quote unquote, is not allowed out on an open case. They are correct about that, LAPD. They can't release. This is unbelievable. While the police were there, she went to his journal or diary and tore out X amount of pages that she decided was him discussing suicide in general in the past. His private journal where he says, I feel like killing myself. I can't take it anymore, whatever. She tears that out and gives it to LAPD, for which they did not want to let go of in case the case is pursued by the district attorney. It's astounding. And the family, to their credit, filed, I didn't know this until recently, filed a FOIA request to get all of this stuff, the personal stuff, from LAPD, and was still rebuffed by LAPD. So, I mean, at some point, you got to shit or get off the pot. Now, what does she do? Instead of disappearing, instead of going about her business, she sues the family, the estate, for all the publishing rights immediately, which opened up my brain to this double indemnity idea of the fact that this was a murder for money. She sues the family, says she was his manager, says she was his wife, says that he guaranteed her 15% of everything as a manager and 50% of his estate. And she loses in the appellate court for a reason that is really unusual. In a 2-1 decision, the California appellate court in the case against the estate of Elliott Smith ruled that she was an unlicensed agent in the state of California, which is true, talent agent, and had no rights to anything she was claiming. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, that tells me that they didn't like her and they found an out.
Right. That's what I think. That's what I think. So she appeals it, doesn't give up. Appeals the case, loses again. And I think she just didn't wake up one day and said, this is what I'm going to do. I think this was pre-planned. And I believe the family, from what I'm understanding, does not believe it's a suicide. And they wouldn't give Gil Reyes the music from Elliott Smith because she was someone who approached, Gil Reyes was approached by Jennifer Chiba and put herself into his movie. saying, I want to tell my story. And we've seen the movie multiple times, Eric and I. It's on Vimeo. And it's her changing.
I even bought it, the son of a bitch.
Well, it's her. He gave me a copy. So he came over to my place, not my place. I met him at the library at a public location to get a copy of it back, when it first came out. And a lot of it is her crying and different cuts, different locations, edited really weirdly to make her look like the victim.
Check out episode 1 of this because the footage is there and it's already been cleared. I'm not going to put it up again for another strike, but it's all there and it's evaluated.
Right.
So everybody check that out. Link is in the description.
Right. I mean, look, surely the point of the matter is there's clearly enough evidence to go to a grand jury. Again, this is just crazy, that this has not been given to a grand jury.
Let them decide it, to either throw it out.
Right, that was always been my thing. Yeah, that was always been my feeling. Let them decide. Let a grand jury, let the system play out. You've got so many factors here indicating homicide. I don't know. You could bring in your experts and these percentages that Allison was a fan. She's French. And we attempted to do an interview with her. We had some technical problems and some language problems, but she has pursued this case from a fan's point of view and as a rock writer for 20 years, and finally culminating this year with her book. Right? I mean, that came out, and that's kind of why
like around the time we did the show, a little bit after, late last year. The book came out. I'm going to try to get some of the interview together if I can and put it on Locals.
Right. Now, keep in mind, in the medical autopsy, the toxicology report, he's clean. He's clean. He's on psychiatric meds, low dosages of antidepressants and Klonopin, anti-anxiety, all super low doses. He's on Bupinex, which is an opiate blocker. But there are no street drugs, and these are all, I think you're showing the forensic toxicology report there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Adderall, a type of Adderall for attention deficit disorder that he suffered from. Strattera and Remron are both antidepressants.
But no cocaine, no fentanyl, no meth, no opiates, morphine, none of that.
Nope. Now, keep in mind, she's not clean. Keep in mind, she is not clean. She's working as a therapist. People have crazy jobs out here in LA, straight jobs. And that's been the tradition. And one of the reasons it's such a crazy place is they're more focused on their careers. Like I said, I went to a Beverly Hills dentist, an Indian guy, and his rates were so expensive. He said, Mark, do you think I want to be a dentist? I said, I don't know. You're a top dentist in Beverly Hills. What do you want? He leaves me in the chair, and I'm on nitrous. Leaves me in the chair, comes back in, starts showing me frame color photos of him. And he says, this is why I came here. I go, what is it? He says, he's the biggest Elvis impersonator in India. He's showing me photos of his dream. And he goes, but I now have to be a dentist. And that's in a microcosm, Los Angeles. Nobody wants to be what they're freaking doing. And because of that, they don't do what they're doing very well. In New York, a dentist is a dentist. He's not pushing a screenplay. Here, this straight job is a distraction. And that's why I'm mentioning her therapist job as a child therapist, art therapist, or marriage counselor. She really wants to be Courtney Love. And imagine if Courtney Love was your therapist. Kind of look at it that way, because that's what we're looking at here. You're talking about a woman who is bipolar, or at least borderline personality disorder, based on everybody's testimony over the years of
she had problems.
She had problems. I'm not diagnosing her from afar, but she had, according to many people, some mental issues and substance abuse.
And expressed them.
With kind of weak, timid boyfriends, you know what I mean, who were nice guys. Like Elliott was a tiny little guy who was the sweetest guy anybody ever knew, and yet she turned him in. Here's her attitude towards the entire project we're doing. So
that was to Allison, I think.
That was to Allison, yeah, who was trailing her. Allison's like a Nick Danger, third eye. Look at that.
She's a sweetie.
Look at this. Wow.
That's what she has to say to all of us.
Like that, by the way, nobody does a finger like that back east. You know what I mean? That's not how you do the finger. That's like so mechanical the way she.
No, that's full form. I mean, that's got form, foundation. I mean,
right. That's like
it is
really. You know what that is? That's a really angry, targeted middle finger. You know what I mean? Like people flip people to bird back east all the time. It's just like you throw it up there, and you know what I mean. This is with meaning.
Oh yeah, no, it's clear. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's perfectly posed. It's framed beautifully. Got a good background. You know, it's not a casual. Bird. This bird's not going to fly away.
Fingers. You know what it is? She's probably a bass player, and her fingers are able to manipulate them very well. Yeah. People with arthritic fingers can't really get that going.
Yep. And with that lovely veneer.
How about this one? After the death, she allows fans to come to the death house on the weekend on vacations, little miniature rock and roll. I swear to God. And on websites, they find her and they come and stay in the same house where the crime occurred for the weekend. And she takes them on a tour of Elliott's hotspots, right?
Oh my God.
You can't make this up. This is pretty recent. She takes them on a tour of spots where Elliott, like a Hollywood tour of where he performed. She drives him around. I guess there was some money involved. So this girl contacts Allison Camus, and she's one of the girls. She meets her boyfriend there, and other couples are there, other people. I guess maybe 6 or 4 per weekend would pay to do this. And she takes them around, and the boyfriend lived in Hollywood, and the girl lived in New York or something. And she steals his boyfriend, moves him into the house, and the boyfriend now is calling her up in New York saying she's trying to kill me, smashing bottles over my head. This is in Allison's book. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying what happened.
By the way, folks, part of the reason that she could do these little tours is Elliott Smith was like a god to the emo crowd who were very suicidal and dark and depressive. He is like a major figure. So I could see, and it's very, very sad. That's part of the reason that the suicide legend has stuck. They get mad. I'll tell you what, if I challenge everyone, go to the Reddit / R. Elliott Smith, and then say something about it not being suicide, and see how long you survive.
They'll go crazy.
Oh,
they
want
it to be suicide in the worst way. But she knows all this. She knows all this, Chiba. She knows that that's the prevailing, because those are his lyrics. That's his milieu. That's what that emo thing that Eric is talking about. That's part of the lifestyle, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this does not negate the singing and songwriting ability that he had, which is brilliant. Absolutely
beautiful
genius.
Voice, and
absolutely voice like an angel. I mean, brilliant guitar player, plays every instrument on the albums. He comes back and he starts doing From a Basement on a Hill out in Malibu. Also, still using drugs, but functioning. A lot of guys use drugs and make albums. I hate to tell people, but you can use drugs and make albums. Really?
No,
yeah, it's been done for years.
No, it's not possible.
All right. So he was doing that, but at the end, like I said, he was clean as a whistle. And she wanted him or got him to sign up with her therapist as his therapist, not as couples therapy. This is a therapist named Abigail Stanton in Pasadena or Glendale. He got her to sign up with her as his therapist. Now, keep in mind, his father in Portland is a psychiatrist. So this is not a guy who, comes from a working class background. Remember to subscribe. Yeah, I forgot about that. Thanks for the reminder. Where's the teletype on the bottom? Where's
it'll get there.
Okay.
I'm so engrossed, man. I'm engrossed in the story.
The father is a psychiatrist. He calls up the therapist, Abigail Stanton, and said, "Did your client kill my son?" You can't make this up. And she says, "No, he did not kill you. She did not kill your son." And he kind of has to accept this. I mean, what else is he going to do, Eric? You know what I mean?
Professional courtesy. Yeah.
Professional courtesy, but she's violated professional courtesy by having a couple as separate patients. It is one of the taboos. You can't even have them separately after one is done as a patient. because you know too much about
conflict of interest.
It's a conflict of interest. That's where I was going. It actually happened to me in real life, so I can speak from personal experience. But the reality of it is, she, had a history of being violent towards her boyfriends, according to allegedly various sources in the book. So you got to take that into account. However, he might have killed himself. And one of the strangest things, I talked to Dallas Taylor one time, the late Dallas Taylor, the drummer for Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young. And Dallas Taylor told me he took a butcher knife, stabbed himself in the stomach, and jumped out a third-floor hotel window to kill himself in a drug-fueled rage. But he was high as a kite, ended up in a dumpster. He landed in a dumpster, woke up the next day with flies on his wound and the knife in his stomach. And I said, Dallas, that's a great story. However, do you believe that you could have stabbed yourself in the stomach twice? And he said, it's not on your fucking life. He said, I did it once, jumped out the window, blacked out, woke up the next day. He said, I couldn't even do it. I couldn't even use a knife for years because of the incident where he stabbed himself in the stomach. Now, that being said, stabbing yourself in the heart twice without any drugs, without any agitation, the kid...
Which is significant. I mean, I think that the toxicology report is as important as stabbing himself twice. Like if he is riddled with as much coke as Al Pacino and Scarface, then it'd be like,
right. You need that. Right. That's why everyone who does this, of the tiny percentage that do it, which is minimal, are high as a kite, or
hallucinating, or something, or completely. They have to be completely, really hyped up to do that.
Even meth people don't do it to themselves. They take a machete and they cut your head off because you're talking and they're talking, and they just cut your head off. They don't cut their own head.
I defer to your experience.
Oh, yeah. No. I could put together a documentary of head chopping out here by meth people. And one of the meth guys told me and they do it to their own mothers.
Oh, wait, that was a porn actor who did that, right?
Tons of guys have done it. It's not just one guy. It happens all the time here. And everybody has one simple explanation to the police. They wouldn't stop talking. And that's the reason they cut their heads off. But that's separate. They don't do it to themselves, is what I'm saying.
So it's effective.
It's very effective. It ends the conversation. But however, this is a guy, again, 12 noon on a Friday, like a day like this in October, where he's clean as a whistle. He's been clean for a year. She's whatever she's doing. She's in the basement mixing up the medicine. Johnny's on the pavement thinking about the government, whatever's going on here.
Okay, Bob.
Well, he was considered the Dylan of his generation. So I don't say that lightly, mixing Bob metaphors, because he has a lot of similarities to Bob. Diminutive in size, an unusual vocal style. There's Bob, blonde-haired Japan Bob.
And there's a similarity there.
There is a similarity. Yeah, that's blonde Bob at the end. But the only other incident, just to get on the record, of an attempted suicide, which most people do not believe is a suicide, is him in a van on the road with a couple of bands in a van driving through the woods of North Carolina, drunk as shit. And the van opens up the back and he runs in total darkness and jumps off the road and ends up in a tree and doesn't even recall doing it. And one of the tree limbs gets impaled in his back. This has been used by Chiba and the others as saying he has attempted suicide many times. This is the only example. He's drunk. He runs out of a van, jumps off the road in total darkness, and ends up in a tree.
Yeah.
And is embarrassed the next day for having done it because he terrified everybody and scared them to death. You know what I mean? But again, a man who talked about suicide, did he, burn himself with cigarettes? Absolutely. Did he take a lot of drugs? Absolutely.
But he was on the mend. And that's the weird part. And I love your friend's point, though, that just makes so much sense. Why not a hot shot? He'd be out. And he'd get that nice ride on the way out, too.
Schoenkoff is talking from statistical experience. Right. I mean, junkies don't stab themselves in the heart. I'm sorry. They take heroin unless you're
that one more high.
Unless you're Cobain, who just,
Yeah, absolutely. It was clearly, there's no controversy or question about that one at all.
Right. I mean, how much cocaine was in Cobain's system? Cocaine in Cobain.
Let's just say it's probably more lines than you can rhyme.
Right. Dude, Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine. Wasn't there a lot of cocaine in his autopsy, if I recall?
I don't remember all of it,
well,
but
somebody in the chat will remember.
There's a ton, and we probably will not cover Kurt Cobain. That's been covered a lot.
We're looking at untold stories, and we don't do requests, by the way. A lot of people, can you investigate my mother?
We listen.
What's that?
We'll read it.
I'll listen to you.
Okay.
Can you investigate my grandfather who once knew Nixon and was a shady guy? I mean, we're not a jukebox for that, but we've got a list a mile long anyway, Eric and I, and it'll probably outlive me, the list. So we're trying to do as many as we can as quickly.
I know that. By the way, that's what I hear all the time is, come on, Hunley. Come on, I'm going to die before
I don't have time. I got to get these stories out, Hunley. This part 2 had to be done because it was a big story. And hopefully Netflix will pick up my show, which would be really
your
helpful.
Script. We'll have to put that on Locals.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, it's not a complete script. It's a documentary outline kind of script. You know, but it's got scene list and bullet points, a lot of stuff to it. I mean, we put a lot of work into this over the past 20 years. But the reality of it is there's a lot of meat on this bone. There's a lot of meat on this bone because he gets a letter from Charlie, his stepfather, apologizing. There's a question of whether he was sexually abused by his stepfather. The sister denies it. The sister grows up to be a lesbian, something or other. The sister denies. There's a picture of his sister. There's Charlie, the stepfather. Yeah. So Elliott, at the end of his life, was starting to have repressed memories of sexual abuse by this man. The sister is from him and the mother, and he thinks that he was sexually abused, and he starts to pinpoint it and begins to tell people about it. And that's the sister. Yeah. She denies all this. Ashley. Yeah. She denies all this. And I think she is one of the family sources for Camus and some others off the record. But that being said, Elliott starts to have visions of the sex abuse, which is usually goes hand in hand with drug addiction. You know what I mean? And usually trauma, as Dr. Drew points out, it's one of the leading. Yeah, that's her on his back. Yeah, that's in Dallas when he was, I think, came home for a weekend or something. He was in college at the time. He went to Hampshire, one of the 7 sisters in Massachusetts liberal arts school, got a degree in philosophy and political science. I don't know. He ended up working in a bakery. He pointed out he got a degree in political science and philosophy from Hampshire, which is about as valuable as. Oh, there he is. Yeah, that's
high school, right?
That's in high school in Dallas. Yeah, that's a good one. When he had the band Stranger Than Fiction. But yeah, so he was suicidal for a lot of reasons that may be related to drug addiction. And when you go into recovery from addiction, a lot of this stuff surfaces when you're clean, which is why you either go crazy or you have to get treatment for these various historical things. You can't just let them fester because you'll either commit suicide or pick up drugs and alcohol again. So there is that debate. And he gets a letter, and the letter is opened the day after his death by Chiba. And it's from Charlie apologizing for whatever he did to him. And I'd love to see that letter, apologizing for whatever he did. And he's mended his ways. He's a better man now. Goes on and on and on, apologizing to this guy who's now dead. And Chiba got the letter in the mailbox the next day. By the way, allegedly, and this is allegedly, he had started this part's not allegedly. He started a abused child foundation with Jerry Schoencup from the Malibu Rehab, a nonprofit. And apparently from my sources, when Chiba came back from Boston, she cashed these checks that were in the mailbox and used them for her own personal piggy bank or something, and was somehow caught by a postal inspector. That's all I know about that allegedly happening. I've heard this from a couple of different people. I've never seen any documentation of it. I've just heard that, but it would seem to fit allegedly into this profile.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds great.
You know, it's Fun Friday, Eric. So we talk about.
That's what I was going to say. This is absolutely
a happy Friday.
Summertime, so remember
July
to subscribe.
4th, fun Friday weekend journey into mayhem, murder, and suicide.
Yeah, and on that note, have we talked about merch?
No, we have not talked about merch. But do you have any?
Of course, we have merch. I'm wearing merch. You just bought merch.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the polo. My favorite polo. I wear it on most shows. We of course have the camper cup.
Oh, that's back in. Look at that thing. But let me ask something. Is there a lip on that cup?
Yeah.
Like a kind of a lip, because I have no, is what I'm saying. Touch the silver part.
Yeah, you can see that there's a lip that sticks out.
Does that stick? Does that bother you?
No.
Okay. Well, then you got a different mouth than I
do. Perhaps.
I don't know. I don't know. I like the cup, but you know. All right, what else you got? What else you got, Hunley?
We have the officially named from the chat, by the way, Oswald.
Oh, Oswald the dog. Yeah, Oswald the dog.
Now,
that dog's a patsy.
How many shows? Come on,
that dog's a patsy, Hunley.
Of course he's a patsy. But he's a really cute patsy.
All right, he's an orphan. That dog's got to be taken in by somebody.
But we get support from people. And by the way, you guys, you've been super patient. Somebody pointed out they liked that I held off on super chats. So I want to do that now. And, thank you very much.
I just want to point. Who's this one?
Oh, the Feds are watching. They're a new member. And thank you very, very much.
That's a good name.
Yeah. By the way, that's a fun one to put on your Wi-Fi. FBI surveillance van.
Right.
Sparty Matt. This is a good question on this. Do we think this case would be more or less likely to find guilt than back when it happened? I don't know anymore.
I don't know anymore with this I mean, it's a woman suspect, which I always thought was part of the motivation as to why it wasn't pursued. She's Asian, so it's a minority. And like I said, it was a period of time where they had lost a couple of high-profile cases.
What are you talking about?
Dog abuse by Fisher. Dog abuse. Well, last night I told Eric, and he apparently consulted with his wife, that I have 293 books on the JFK assassination.
Oh, hold on. I got the text.
Okay. I have 200. I counted them for somebody else who I'm going to leave them to when they get me. So the guy said, how many are there? So I know.
Here we go. It's the exact quote was, I have 293 books with a book icon on the Kennedy assassination. I got to get a new hobby.
Right.
And I wrote back, Leslie agrees.
I got to get to 300, and PayPal really helps me get these books. I'm 7 short. Like somebody sent me the one on General Walker. And I mean, these books are like $40, $50, Eric. The Walker book, I want to get to 300 books. That's my goal. The Feds are watching. It's going crazy, this guy.
The Feds are watching are awesome, man. Thank you.
What is it? Like a room full of guys in Scotland?
Yeah, and you know what? I have a lot of moderators from Scotland and stuff too. I mean, Scots rock.
This guy has got to go over to Wales or Scotland, wherever she is, and find her.
There you go.
Chiba. The Scotland guy. We got to work with him. The
Absolutely. The real life moderation.
Anyway, the PayPal operation goes to these Kennedy books and some other books, but really I'm 7 books short now for the 300. So it's a special appeal. Van 3 of my wife. That's funny. That's funny. Also, you can follow me at Lord Buckley, which is a fun Twitter account, and it really is me, and I respond to as many as I can, obviously. But we respond to the comments also here. So
yeah, we do. You can follow me, and I do post about the show when it's going to come out. Sometimes Mark actually retweets it. Other times, you never know with him. So you definitely want to follow me if you want to know when the show's coming out.
I get busy reading these Kennedy books all the time. But I think we're going to do Jim Garrison next, speaking
Tuesday.
Of Kennedy.
Yep.
It's a lot of books I need, folks. Look at that Venmo. Look at that PayPal. Think about your own lives.
And locals.
And locals. Think about locals more importantly than your own lives. Think about locals, because what goes on locals, Eric?
Locals is
there it is. There's the teletype.
It is like a private Facebook in a lot of ways, because we can post, but even better, you can post as well if you're a supporter, and you can comment on each other's stuff. So you can have the conversation. We obviously can't get to everything all the time. We've got brilliant people, and you guys are putting up amazing stuff that I've never heard of anything else. And I mean, while we may not cover it on the show, a lot of people would be very interested in your stories that
Right.
you know about and different things to share. We learn from it all the
I
time.
also put up these scripts and oddities that I have from my private files, so that is, Mark, keep telling your stories. Well, I think stories is misspelled, but is that how they spell it in Scotland?
Might be.
Right. Might be. I don't know. There's language differences, really subtle.
Nate, yes, I actually had Tom O'Neill on the Eric Hunley channel, and
Great
I know
book.
Mark's
That's a
talking.
great book. It's a great book.
It is a good book.
One of the reasons it's a great book is he destroys Vincent Bugliosi. And I don't mean destroys him editorially. He personally destroys him by meeting with him and uncovering dirt on Vincent Bugliosi that blew my mind, how corrupt this guy was and how he made up the entire forget about making up the entire Helter Skelter book. His lifestyle of having multiple families and women abuse and everything else is worth the price of the book by itself. O'Neill should get credited for simply showing us who Vincent Bugliosi really is. Yeah. Oh, by the way, did you get the Oswald trial I sent you in the mail?
Yes, I got a couple DVDs. I haven't actually
say something. I don't know. It could be Flo. Say you got it at least. Jesus Christ. What? Can you pull stuff off of that and put it on local?
Yes.
Because the Ruth Payne interview on there by Jerry Spence, the cross-examination of Ruth Payne is worth the.
Didn't you already post that? No, you put it on Twitter.
I put it on Twitter, but it may be good to put it on locals and have some people put the whole thing up for all I care. It's a great phony mock trial with Jerry Spence versus Vincent Bugliosi, and puts the Oswald case on trial with real witnesses that we know about, including Ruth Payne, who we just had Max Good on with his fantastic film, which everybody seems to be watching, and enjoying. It's a great little film about Ruth Payne, and he confronts her at the end. He also told me that she's got a handler now, and if you saw the movie, it's the guy with the boxes, and like I pointed out earlier, all of these
by boxes he means metal containers,
metal cases, the small metal cases. And if you saw the film, if you didn't see the film, see the film because it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic film.
It's like $3 to rent. It's not.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. I got to watch it again tonight. But the reality of it is, all of these people end up with handlers. And I point out Dan Moldea, who is another mob type author who wrote books about the mob, ends up writing an RFK assassination book and then becomes the handler for Thane Eugene Caesar for 25 to 30 years, cock-blocking people from interviewing the alleged assassin of RFK, Thane Eugene Caesar, to the point where RFK Jr. 2 years ago, he tried to shake him down for $25,000 to interview Thane Eugene Caesar, who was living right here in the Valley in L.A.
By the way, folks, we have 3 episodes on Sirhan. We talk extensively about this on the channel, so definitely check that out. And we talk about all of this going down because Mark actually testified at Sirhan's parole hearing.
That's personally. Right. That's right. And RFK Jr. was there too, and his son, and another Kennedy was there, Douglas Kennedy from Fox News. All of us agreeing that he needed to be pardoned, and the Kennedy girls went on a massive campaign denouncing him, saying that, to go as far as to say, if Sirhan was released, this older man who has a spotless prison record, he would take an Uber from Pasadena, where he's from, to Malibu and kill them. That's how crazy the Kennedy girls got, and denouncing their own brothers and family members about this incident.
Go a little further. What is he, 70-something years old, 5'3"?
Ridiculous. And then Newsom, the heroic Gavin Newsom, who pardoned over 75,000 murderers in the past year, said he couldn't, that he was a danger to society. I swear to God, he literally said that Sirhan was a present danger to society, couldn't possibly let him out after these Kennedys had called him and told him not to do it, the courageous governor of the state of California.
This is a good question for you, Mark. What
is this?
Well, he's asking what recent Kennedy book surprised you and gave you information you hadn't seen before.
Oh, well, the two. Obviously, JFK and the Unspeakable is the one that Max Good uses for his documentary. Recent book, well written, incredibly well done by James Douglas. Fantastic book. And then the second edition of Destiny Betrayed by James DiEugenio, which covers most of the stuff that we're going to get into with Jim Garrison on Tuesday. DiEugenio, of course, worked and wrote the documentary Destiny Betrayed with Oliver Stone. The 4-hour cut is what I recommend, not the Showtime 2-hour cut, JFK Revisited. Destiny Betrayed is on Amazon. It's 4 hours, 4 one-hour segments will cover and blow your mind about the autopsy. It will blow your mind. Anyone who watches the 4 hours who still believes that Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone assassin should check themselves into the flight deck at Bellevue Hospital in New York immediately, because you've got problems. I strongly recommend you watch Jim DiEugenio and Oliver Stone's brilliant Destiny Betrayed, which is a new name for it because they're marketing it as a 4-hour. It's the original cut, director's cut. Don't bother with the Showtime version. That's 2 hours. Go to the 4-hour original. I think it'll cost you $9.99 on Amazon, God forbid. It's so incredibly shot by using the people that Oliver uses from JFK, the same cinematographer, the same score composer. So it looks incredible, sounds incredible, and the information is all new and incredible post JFK, the movie, up until today.
There you go. And that gives you something to do until Tuesday. Something to do
over the long weekend, because nobody can afford the gas and you can't get on a plane. And apparently Bill Gates is buying up all the farmland in Nebraska. You could see what
the whole country,
doing here. Yeah, I know. He's buying up every piece of land, him and his people. You can't fly anywhere because of the chaos on the airlines, and you can't drive anywhere now. I'm exaggerating for effect, but ostensibly, because of the price of gas, we're now again locked down in a type of lockdown with a different motivation, but the different style, but the same goal, while they buy up all the land around us. It's really creepy, but that seems to be what's going on, Eric.
Yep. So on that happy note, folks, we'll be back. Jim Garrison on Tuesday. I hope to see you in Locals.
Right.
And remember to subscribe. It really does help. Please and please tell a friend.
The needle's moving, Eric. You're right. The needle's moving. Let's see if we can get to 25,000 by the end of this period.
Yeah, let's get this channel so hot that we can actually get Oliver to come on.
Right. They're going to kill me by that point. Well, I want to keep it small. Don't tell anybody. Don't listen to him.
Okay,
we're done.
We're done. Just remember to subscribe.